I wanted to just do a quick video about our formula sheet and also the way the AP test is broken down time-wise and point-wise. So um, this is a formula sheet, and this is something I'm going to allow you guys to use on your practice tests, just so you don't have to worry about memorizing everything yet. Now, hopefully, if you know these things, you can be quicker. I mean, if you're having to look everything up, it's probably going to slow you down too much. But here's all the formulas. Now, just one point is, even though I'm going to let you use this on the practice test, we do need to know these formulas. None of these will be given to you on the AP test for sure, guaranteed. I know some tests give you some formulas, unlike statistics or physics, but they won't give you any. So we're going to have a formula exam in a few weeks. And it's going to be a 50-point exam, all right, that you'll have to do without the formula sheet, obviously. On the back, I have all the big theorems and tests. Also very handy. Those are things that I don't think you need to memorize. You need to understand. They're not formulas to memorize. The front's more formulas to memorize. This is more ideas to understand. Over here on the right side, I break down the AP test. And so I just think that's good. Now, the important ideas, a lot of times, these are really good for free response, FRQs, and justifying your answers. You definitely have to name these and show the work for them, show the setups to get full credit. Now, the multiple choice is 50% of your exam. So here, we'll zoom in here. And so just so you know what to expect, 50%, there's 30 questions without a graphing calculator, which they give you 60 minutes to do. That's an average of 2 minutes per question. And then you get 15 with a graphing calculator, and those are an average of 3 minutes each. Just because you're allowed to use a graphing calculator doesn't mean it will help you for probably at least half of them. So the graphing calculator section really has a lot of non-graphing calculator problems still. That gives you a total of 45 questions. Now, some of the practice tests I give you might have a slight different 30 instead of 30, 15. They might be like 28 and 17 or something like that, which is the way it used to be. There's 45 questions. It needs to make up half of your raw score. And since free response is 54 points, they make this 54 points by multiplying by the factor of 1.2, which makes it out of 54. Free response, you get 6 of them, and you get 2 with a graphing calculator. So this is a mistake right here, with a graphing calculator, and 4 without. You do the first 2 first with your graphing calculator, and then you have to put your calculator away after 30 minutes, and then you can start working on the other ones. You can still work on the first ones that needed a graphing calculator, but you just don't have a graphing calculator anymore. So hopefully, if you know time's running out on the graphing calculator questions, as far as having a graphing calculator, try and get all the calculations done, because a lot of the explanations, and there's even parts on them that don't require calculators. And even if you just totally run out of time with the graphing calculator and don't get the calculations done, show the setups, because that's where most of the points are anyways. There's 6 questions times 9 points gives you 54 points. It's a total of 108. Now, what does it take to get a 5, a 4, a 3, a 2, a 1, or a 0? Typically, it takes about a 72 out of 108 to get a 5. So what's a 72 out of 108 percent-wise? It's a 67%. It's a D plus to get a 5, which is supposed to be the equivalent of A. Well, that just means that this is a tough test, and they make it tough, and you're not expected to get all the problems right. You're expected to get a fair amount of them wrong, possibly even a third of them, and still get what is considered an A. under a time pressure, no formula constraint, situation. So a 5 is like an A in my class. So on your practice test, if you score, and this is going to change each practice test, and every year these numbers change. This is just a rough idea, okay? Just to give you, it's close to this. But on your practice test, if you score, say, a 72 out of 108, which is a 67%, I'm going to give you an A minus, a 90%. So I'm going to scale your scores into out of 100 based off of this idea. Now, the way you do that, just as an example, just to show you how I do it, let's say you got a 65. Now, a 65 out of 108 on this it's between 60 and 72, right? So, I mean, roughly you should expect, and 72 is a 90, 60 is the bottom of the 4, so that's an 80%, a B minus. You should expect it to get an 80-something percent in my class. Well, the way I calculate it is I use a method called linear interpolation, which I remember have to use a lot in college and engineering, when we'd have to look up values in tables and they would only list certain values, and you kind of wanted a value that was like in between the values they gave you. So linear interpolation means, well, you kind of assume that between the values you have a linear relationship is maintained, which is not true 100%, but it kind of gives you a way of doing it. So 65 is here. So you're either 5 away from 60 or you're 7 away from 72, and the whole gap is 12. So you're either 5/12 of the way between 80 and 90%. So you're 5/12 of 10%, and you can add that to 80% after you're done. And that would give you an 84.16%. Or you could say, let's do 90% and take away 7/12 of 10% to get the same result. So you can start from the bottom and add up, or you can start from the top and subtract down. So that's the goal. I've never had a student get 100%. Mr. Statham never had a person get 100% on a practice test. I don't think we've had it done on the actual AP test. The actual AP test, you don't get your percent or your score at all. You just get a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But if you get a perfect score, I believe they'll contact you and they'll contact your school, and maybe I'll find out. But as far as practice tests, the closest I ever got was this will be notorious. Philip Kraustoff a few years ago. He was like half a point away from a perfect score on a practice test. The one mistake he made was something like this. Like, let's say that for response, let's say that the answer was like this, 3/2 pi. It wasn't exactly this, but something like this. And so on his calculator, he did 3 divided by 2 pi. And he got 4.712. But that's wrong, because your calculator is not enforcing parentheses around the 2 pi. It's doing things left to right. It thinks that you want to divide by 2 and then multiply by pi. It should have been 3 divided by 2 pi in parentheses, which is a different answer, 0.477. Anyways, shout out to Philip for getting so close. But anyways, you can get, there's a lot of room to get an A, 72 to 108. So to get an A plus, you kind of have to get a pretty high score. I mean, even just to get 100 out of 108 is really impressive. That I only get a handful of students on all the practice tests each year that usually even break the 100 out of 108 mark. So, break the 92% on the AP test raw score. I mean, that's a high A though. Okay, I hope this was helpful. And now you kind of know more about what to expect on your practice test and the actual AP test.